is set on a timer today.
30 seconds for the camera.
30 seconds till live. Good evening. Welcome to the October 19th, 2023 Skokie 68 School Board of Education meeting. A lot of words there. I believe we will start with a roll call.
Well, Jordan. Here. Joseph.
Here.
Lanigrove. Here. Ruffner.
Here.
Sturbins.
Here.
Sullivan. Here. Warshaw. Here. Thank you.
This is the time for public comment. I do not believe we have any registered nor received online, so we will move right ahead on to our superintendent's reports, beginning with our search profile. Gentlemen,
Wow.
we give you BWP.
Thanks. First of all, we just wanted to introduce to everybody our third partner in this endeavor, Brian Gannon. Some of you talked to Brian on the phone, but he wasn't here originally when we introduced. And he is an alum of District 68. So living the dream for you guys about that, Brian. Coming back and bringing his knowledge back to the district.
Thanks, that's it, Orchard. That was north, so.
Oh boy.
89. Awesome. Yeah. I remember that. We're close to it.
And Brian's a superintendent in the Grange. So, a success story from District 68. Yeah, and Brian,
Thanks for having me back.
passing out the profile, he's sharing, we'll just kind of walk you through this. The three of us are going to take turns, and we'll run robin, give you the profile, and give you an opportunity to ask questions. And then we'll give you a final quick update as to where we're at, numbers-wise, candidates, that whole thing. So things are very nice. Looking very good. First one. Okay, you ready?
I think we're all.
So with this, you have the superintendent profile. This is what we use and you will use in our interviewing process, our screening, our paper screening, our interview screen, when we meet candidates. When you meet candidates, you'll have this as guidance. And we're not going to read line by line. You'll keep this is yours. And then we will take this and use it again in our processes. You will be able to take the little pieces in there that are important to you, come up with your own profile, your own questions. It's just good backup information. So with no further ado, let's kind of walk through the first page. Is called the Superintendent Leadership Profile. Excuse me. And this profile describes the desired characteristics and experiences that we have heard from all the constituent groups and through all of our surveying and everything that we've done in order to assess information from the community into this profile. So, characteristics, experiences, and backgrounds. It's based on stakeholder data from board interviews, from our focus groups. We were here for pretty much a day, a couple of weeks ago. And all three of us were here that day, by the way. And it's used to screen applicants to determine whether there's a match for the district. Somehow or another, you need something to cut it down. Right now, we're at like 40 candidates. We need something to sort through and find the candidates that most meet what your constituents tell you. You as a board make the final decision, but it's certainly good to have this input. We can't go anywhere without that input, so it's great. And it will provide guidance for you in selecting this new superintendent. So the main data sources on the next page are focus groups. We had 7 different focus groups. We had the community survey. We had 147 respondents to the survey. And one-to-one phone interviews, and we had all 7 of you on phone interviews. I know we each took turns, and we had contact with all 7, which is great. Most of the time in the districts, we're lucky to get 5 or 6 board members. I'll just do the survey, but it was great to have information information from all 7. The data sources are the building and district certified staff and classified staff, PTA leadership, building administrators, junior high staff, elementary staff, the union executive board, parents and community members, and board member interviews. So those are all the pieces that go into the information that we've gotten for this profile. And lots of it. So with that, we want to highlight the things that we heard. These are the things that you really want to take note of.
Yeah, so it was a pleasure for me to sit in these focus groups. This is a destination district, and there was no doubt talking to all the different stakeholders. This is going to be a very sought after job. 40 applicants is a good pool, which is great. And then of course, as Mark said, the hard part now is kind of breaking that down. But there was so many commonalities when we did the interviews. And I think that shows a really tight and united district. Some of those strengths where diversity was mentioned quite a bit. And it was mentioned both actually as a strength and as an area to focus on, because with diversity comes so much, it's not just about celebrating diversity, it's about engaging with the diversity, it's making sure that all the stakeholders feel comfortable and safe. And so I love when I hear that from stakeholders, because diversity is clearly a wonderful thing to have, and it's valued here, but with it becomes some additional good work, and that is also recognized. Financial resources, that was also brought up. In many cases, it's both a strength and an area, and obviously the district is very strong financially, which is wonderful, but it also, we must make sure that it remains strong financially, right? And there's challenges that come with that as well. The staff, again, you'll see as when Phil talks about some of the survey data, it was very, very apparent that stakeholders love the staff. They understand the staff is very committed and dedicated to the work that they do. And you hear that a lot, we don't always hear that. But to hear from all stakeholders coming together and almost saying the exact same thing about the staff was very powerful. Facilities that they're being upgraded, the early childhood project came up a couple times. The positive work culture, you'll see that throughout this. Again, I'm a firm believer that any organization, your culture is your ceiling, and the ceiling is extremely high here, based on the feedback that we've gotten from stakeholders. Supportive communities love their schools, and again, that's, as I said before, as an ideal and great job for a superintendent. You want to come into a community that is very supportive of the schools. Again, the commitment to early childhood and the potential project that's out there, and then what I found fantastic. I'm a superintendent in LaGrange, and we have a very diverse population. That all staff are in the process of being certified or getting the English language learner endorsement. That is really powerful, and that was something that came up as a strength, which is even more powerful that people recognize the importance of that. Some district challenges. Some of these I mentioned already. A couple times we heard, and it is a consistent challenge for all districts, is to prepare our students for an ever-changing world. And the world is changing now, I'd say faster than it probably has before. So being ready and being on top of that and being proactive about that. More diversity in our hiring, and also in enhancing teacher retention. Of course, I talked about the financial position, maintaining that, facility upgrades, and then communication and outreach with all stakeholders. And again, I don't remember the number of languages that are spoken in the district. I know it's a lot. So that could be checked. But the fact that that is listed as important says a lot about the district.
Yeah, we had a first in this district when we did the survey. Jim came up with this drop-down menu of 124 languages that the survey could be translated to. We had a couple blips, but in reality, we've never seen or done anything like that. Our survey person is enthralled with it, and don't be surprised if you don't get this call one day soon, how to pick your brain on doing that masterful thing. So very good to be able to capture all of those languages.
And then some characteristics for the next superintendent, skills and experience. Again, that culture builder, obviously the positive culture we want to maintain that culture, and it's clearly very important to the community and stakeholders. That communication came up, understanding multilingual early childhood and special education programming, so somebody who's very familiar with programming and the programming that is currently at District 68. Being an active listener, somebody who understands and focuses on the importance of academic learning, but also social emotional learning. Collaboration, again, having that experience with diverse environments, diverse settings, diverse schools, diverse districts, being very student oriented. And this came up several times. Somebody who's going to display integrity and trust. And of course, when we're going through our next interview process, these are things that we're looking for before we bring you a slate of candidates. And then one thing that I'd love to see is that sense of humor. I think that is so important in the work that we do. You don't always see that, but I really value that was something as a characteristic for the next superintendent.
Now we'll shift gears and talk about the survey, which was just mentioned a moment ago by Mark. We had 147 respondents, and then down there you'll see the breakout. I'm not going to read that to you, but you can see the breakout of the respondents. We had a good cross section, which was important with that. On the next page are strengths, and you'll start to see, as Brian had mentioned previously, how you start to see those common themes emerging with it. One of those was having outstanding staff, and that is both teachers and the support staff, the positive culture in the district, a very supportive community, and then very well funded as far as resources go, and then the size of the district of being kind of in that sweet spot, not too big, not too small, so it allows you to be nimble. At the same time, you can offer a comprehensive set of programming, which is very important with that. The next page is talking about the challenges and issues. One of those is educational options and programs as far as being able to have more programming for all the students to meet their needs. Part of that, of course, is a remnant of the COVID and the learning dip that's occurred from that, and there's always going to be a need for that as we recover from that experience. The second one is curriculum, which is one that's always emerging and trying to keep that up to date and relevant and timely. Personnel has already been mentioned, and that really talks about not just attracting staff with diversity, but also retaining them. As you know, the market is getting very tight with that, and it's a challenge. Equity is one that is something that is a goal that's out there. It is always a challenge to continue to drive to do that. And the last one is community relations, and that is to continue that with the variety of communities that you serve here, as far as making sure that we can meet those needs. On the next, superintendent, the characteristics, skills, and experiences, again, you'll see a lot of commonalities there. Someone who values and is committed to the community, someone who's student-oriented and really is focused on students, a good problem solver, and a skilled decision maker, someone who can build trust and credibility for themselves, being an active listener, finance skills, not being a business manager, but being able to be a student enough to know the right questions and how to guide the district forward as we look at the financial part of that. Another important one was having both administrative and teaching experience, which lends itself to credibility with staff that you've had those experiences. Then the last one is experience with multicultural community, which was also listed as being very important with that. The next is the leadership profile, and Mark mentioned that at the very beginning of what that is used for. What we try to do is to really emphasize, using uppercase letters, the key components and concepts of each one. I'm not going to go through word by word, but just want to highlight some of the key ones. One was to be a relationship builder. We're in a people business, which is very important to develop those relationships, and having excellent interpersonal skills. That was mentioned many, many times. Also someone who has experience both at the district level and at the classroom level, and is well-rounded, because the district is not that large, so the superintendent has to have a well-rounded skill set with that. The third one is to be someone who values the community and is invested in it and is accessible and visible so that they're out there and are the face of the school district. Someone who is an advocate of both inclusion and equity is very critical. The next one is someone who is very child and student centered, who engages and listens to all stakeholders and communicates clearly, which helps to establish that trust, integrity, and credibility. The next one is a well-rounded leader who's knowledgeable in instruction, as well as early childhood, which was mentioned a moment ago, multilingual and special services programming, and who focuses on academics, but also the social emotional learning aspect of that as well. The next one is a successful administrator who has that record of success, who is very strong in collaboration, manages, and also has organizational skills that can help bring out the best in others, both the certified staff and the support staff. And finally, someone who understands and values diversity and celebrates the value of diverse populations. So that leadership profile gives us a clear picture and the board a clear picture as we move forward with that. Mark's going to then talk about, so what will be happening next?
So, and I wanted to emphasize that leadership profile page is a summary of all the other components into one handy little checklist, so to speak, as you meet and look at candidates. So down the road, but it's something to keep in mind and pay close attention to as the candidates come through. The last page in your handout just outlines the next steps, sort of a reminder. November 1st, we will present the slate of candidates to you. It's not that far away, actually, 2 weeks away. It seems that we started a long time ago, so here how quickly it's come. And we'll do, at that night, we'll do a workshop with you, preparing you. We have, and this is a good chance to ask this question, we have about 10 pages of sample questions. And a lot of times we bring those to a board and say, hey, rather than trying to drum up, here's some really good, you can take them as they are, you can modify them, you can do whatever you want. Lately, we've been sending them out ahead of time and giving them to boards with the understanding that they're really extremely confidential. We don't want that floating around all over. But it gives people a chance to look through those, and then when we come and sit down at the meeting, it helps design the questions quicker. Otherwise, we've been in sessions where it's 2-3 hours of picking the questions. So would you like us to do that? Send those ahead of time, and you'll have them in your hands. Good, great.
Thank you.
So on November 10th and the 11th, you'll have your first round of interviews. And that will be, yes.
So are we officially doing it on the 10th? I have it on like the 9th and the 7th or something from our last meeting. I know I had for the 9th for like afternoon, so we're sticking with, now we're doing Friday night, because I remember that was the thing.
No, yeah. It was not the 10th.
It was
Yeah.
8 on my calendar.
Yeah, I have the 8th at night, and then the 9th from 12 to 4 for interviews.
We'll find whatever day.
Okay. I just wanna make sure.
8th and 11th.
Yeah, I don't have the
11th.
Okay, I don't have 8th and 11th.
8th and 11th.
8th and
Not
11th.
8th and 11th, yes. The evening of the 8th.
That's so
Okay,
much
so
fun.
not the 9th.
Not bad.
8th and 11th, okay. Then, we'll double check these two. The 28th and the 30th would be your final interviews.
Yes.
Okay, so we're good with that. Then you have a decision to make. Once you're down to your final 2 or 3, we're seeing a lot of times lately that boards have decided to bring 3 people back. We don't want you to feel that you're under tremendous pressure to only pick 2 to bring back. If you really feel strongly about 3 candidates, you can do that with 3. It's just a matter of setting up those interviews, the it'll be 3 at the end rather than 2. And we help you with that and how to structure those. That would be, and you actually, hopefully we got the time right, 6:30 and 8:30 is about 2 hours each. And we haven't decided, do you want to do it here or did you want to go off-site for those? So that's a decision you have to make. It doesn't have to be made tonight. And then the other decision is, do you want to employ an advisory group at the end when you're down to the final 2 or 3? Again, it doesn't have to be made tonight, but it's something we should start thinking about.
I will say we did say maybe 3 hours on the second of those 2 nights in case we did see 3 finalists. That would be the night we would do June. So that's possibly to 9:30 on the 30th, but I don't think we'd had a strong opinion either way about an advisory
We
board.
hadn't made a decision on that.
So that could be part of the conversation on the first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that can be last minute-ish. No need for that. And then it really looks like your board meeting in December is, Jim, I thought you'd have that right at the top of your head.
21st.
Yeah, it looks like you could, barring snowstorms, blizzards, polar vortexes, any in December, you could make that date. You could have everything in place. I think your legal counsel will easily have a template that basically there isn't much difference from superintendent to superintendent. And so, in district to district as to what goes into contract. So it can be, maybe that's our target to get it done. It keeps us on, on timelines that we're interested in. So, and then you become a guy with no cares or worries after that. Questions, comments, anything that we can help you? Go ahead.
I had some questions just going through the report.
Absolutely.
First, thank you, because this is really informative and really helpful. The page on challenges and issues. Was wondering if you could provide any more specificity on what folks said as far as preparing students for a rapidly changing world. What they meant.
So I think some of that kind of connects to, if we go to the survey and we look at challenges, educational options and programs, some of that conversation was kind of really making sure that we have some top of the line educational options and programs designed for future needs, future learning needs, also future employment. Because that's changing so quickly and so rapidly, it's staying ahead of the game so that we are preparing our kids through our programs and offers and curriculum in a way that's going to prepare them for jobs that they don't exist yet. And that's a really hard thing to do.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think Brian's right on target on that. It's more looking into the crystal ball kind of question rather than we're not preparing them right now.
But I'll add to that too, so that's the academic piece. But I think we heard a lot of care about social emotional learning as well. And I think that that's connected to that as well, because that's also, a big point of the world changing so rapidly, is there was a big commitment through all of our interviews on maintaining strong social emotional supports as things continue to change.
Makes sense, thank you. On the same page down at the bottom, communication and outreach with all stakeholders. I think one of you referenced like language barriers, and I just wasn't sure if there was anything else that was raised, or just that is a challenge.
That was a key one, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
But I have to say, I don't think there's a district that we don't work with that doesn't have the topic of communication pop up somewhere on either strengths, needs, or challenges.
Good point.
The other question I had was in the survey demographics. I looked, it so happens that some presentations that you've given to other districts are also online, and so I was able to see the breakdown of the survey demographics. Ours appeared to be inverted as far as the percent that were employees of the district, compared to at least those that I was able to see, where we had, math was not my strength, but I think 84% and 16% were not employed. of the survey responders were district employees. I didn't know if that is similar to what you've seen with other districts, and if that's something we should be concerned about, because I'm worried about not getting full community input on this if the survey is primarily being responded to by district employees.
We always see a pretty good sized percentage of district employees. I have to say, that's generally the largest number. And even in districts, big districts where we get 1,000 or 2,000 survey responses. The people who are there day to day, I think they're bombarded with, do the survey, you know, because they're talking to each other and the principals are having meetings and they're saying, you should do the survey. So it may be a little bit of that. And we always think, what type of a number should we get in what type of district? And we've given up trying to find that answer.
Is our number in the bell curve of what you
For
normally
small,
see?
this is a small district,
Yeah.
as we know. And so you're at like 10% or so compared to the population. Any survey that you would get, if you looked at any survey expert, they're happy with a 2% turnout. So we did okay.
Good.
Yeah, okay. Would we want 50%? Well, we've never seen that. 20%? Never seen that either.
Makes sense. That was all for me. And again, thank you, guys. This is very helpful.
Any other questions from the board?
You know, there's gonna be a test.
On the first, I'll be here.
We forgot to tell you. We have M&Ms for treats if you.
I went through that Excel document many times. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for the presentation, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
See you in a few weeks. We are extremely happy with the number of candidates. And just as an aside for everybody that's here, we've had the largest turnout since pre-pandemic.
And I think your timeline is really great too,
Yeah.
because it's a little bit ahead of the curve.
Great.
Which is very important.
Learning from college applications.
Yeah, there you go.
Enjoy going through all the resumes.
Yes, thanks.
So we're here for if you guys need thought process as well.
Have a great meeting. Good to see you all.
Thank
See
you.
See you in a couple weeks. Yes.
Thank you.
With that,
Mr. Ham?
free from the cumbersome playoff baseball that so many people are hurt.
Watching right until I left. I feel like the deck has been stacked against me. There's Karen's endearing video, this dynamic trio. Now I have to go. What I want to present to you tonight is really it's really a big initiative at Old Orchard Junior High School this year around circles, which I'll talk about in a minute in some detail. But I wanted to frame our circle work within the school in relation to kind of a longer timeline of restorative justice at Old Orchard, as well as kind of within a discourse or a framework that I think would be beneficial to the board. And what I mean by that is I'm trying to capture it by the cart in front of the horse. So I'll expand on that. So really, I think as a principal who has been doing this work for some time, a lot of the pushback that I get around restorative justice is, kids can do anything and nothing's going to happen. And I think a lot of that honestly comes through a true origination of restorative justice that institutionally was kind of embedded with this idea of the school to prison pipeline. So really, it started in New Zealand, there was some work in Canada, and in the United States, it really started to kind of coalesce around this idea that like Black and brown children were being disproportionately punished within schools, which was leading them to be alienated from schools, kicked out of schools, and so on and so forth. And when I say the cart before the horse, what I mean is I think a lot of restorative justice is focused on kind of intervening in that cycle as like a policy aim, But when you really kind of dig into restorative justice, it's something that and something else. Like there's something else that moves that cart forward. So just a quick kind of overview of how restorative justice is defined. I was actually happy to see that there is such a thing as an Office of Justice program in the United States. But the first line is key, and really the way that I think about restorative justice, it's a reframing of crime or misbehavior in relation to harm instead of like breaking the rules, right? So it's not about like what anybody does and how that can fit within this little behavior matrix or within the legal code. It's about what is an action that somebody did, you know, and what harm did that cause, and then what are the steps to take to kind of repair that harm. So, you know, at the top there is that harm is an offense against human relationships. And as I go on here, that's really what I'm arguing the horse is, right? What holds this whole thing along is strong relationships and a strong sense of community. Other kind of key things which we put into practice at Old Orchard, it's really victim focused. That's the first priority. So I used to work in high schools in the city. A lot of times something would happen. Whoever the victim was just kind of, you know, not the ideal key person that's being talked to. Rather, it's the person who did something wrong. Like the victim is key in this scenario because it's supporting and making sure that they're safe, that the harm is corrected. That is the whole focus of the process. And then as you go down there, so all the way at the bottom, the idea here is for the offender to understand what it is that they did that was wrong, the harm that they caused, which often comes from the voice of the victim. But then you see at the bottom, which is why I push back against the kind of crime and no punishment. Like, just because a kid does something wrong, it doesn't mean that they're not going to get a suspension, which I'll talk about in a minute as well. There's a restorative approach to that. What it really means is that setting aside any kind of consequence or punishment that might happen, the primary goal is really to fix the relationship between kids through the support of the community and the school. The way that this is kind of broken down oftentimes in school is the difference between traditional practices of discipline and restorative practices. I'm not going to read through all of these things because those kind of bullet points really touched on it. But you can see the top line is one of the most important ones, which is this difference between schools and rules versus people and relationship, and the key that harm plays in this whole cycle relative to relationships being broken. So trying to go from we're just looking at the cart in terms of discipline and really trying to focus on these kind of systemic issues and institutional problems to really thinking about what's the thing pulling all of this forward. I started off learning about restorative practices, working in alternative high schools in the city. I was in Avondale, which is right next to Logan Square. Long story short, I started to really get into restorative practice work through the Erickson Institute and really like cut my teeth with restorative practices, working with kids who've been, you know, kicked out of their high school or, you know, were just, they didn't fit the mold. And I'm saying that because that really led to a cart-focused thing. So when I worked with kids at the alternative school, a lot of my work was really about restorative mediation. And that's really what I brought to Old Orchard when I came here in 2015. Mediation is essentially, you know, Ryan and I get into a fight. You know, one of us is an offender, the other is a victim. I'm sure Ryan's probably the offender in this situation. But you know, Ryan has to sit there and he has to listen to me say, this is how you harmed me, right? And with some level of detail, going back into the past. Where did this event come from? How did it happen now? And then Ryan has to listen to that. And then Ryan can dialogue back to me with his own understanding of what happened. And the key of this is always to make sure that the relationship is kind of reconnected, but also to really think critically about next steps. So what does Ryan need moving forward? Like that's part of it, right? That like an in-school suspension doesn't take account for it. Traditional discipline doesn't take account for it. Ryan bad, Ryan punished, Ryan back into the general population. This mediation process is as much about, that's not true. It's about Ryan as well as the victim. It's more about making sure that the victim feels safe but it's also focused on Ryan, the deviant that he is, to make sure that whatever led to that behavior can be addressed. Because it's about restoring the community, not just disciplining one child. You're part of the community, right? I put a picture up here. I only put a couple of pictures up here because another thing that we started to do soon after I got here was this idea of transitioning an in-school suspension to, the new term is discipline intervention space, which really means that when a kid is in in-school suspension, that whole day is set up to, use Ryan as the example, not to just sit there quietly or put your head down, but social workers are pushing in, teachers, so this was Mr. Augustine. I wiped out the kid's face. The kid was, not frowning. So the teachers come in. We actually, for this one particular child, there was a space during the day where we took them to the workout room. It's not focused on just punishing the kid. It's focused on making sure they understand what's wrong. They often do kind of like a little research project that's about what they did wrong. And again, it's always focused on concrete steps to move forward. So there was kind of that early period, which was really focused on the discipline side when I first got to Old Orchard. And then around 2018, 2019, we really shifted to the horse part. So we really shifted to the part that when Ryan and I get into a fight, what's going to make that okay is that we value relationships. That was kind of missing. It was all of the stuff at the beginning of my time at Old Orchard was focused in the office. So in 2018 and 2019, we started talking about things like effective language, which is, I see Ryan doing something, and it could be evaluative, like Ryan, stop doing that, blah, 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 blah. Or it could be observational. Ryan, I see that you're doing, so-and-so, please stop playing with Mr. Carlowitz, whatever. So effective language, we started doing proactive circles, which is what we're really focusing on this year. And then social discipline window, which is this really cool thing that is all about doing things with students instead of 2 students or 4 students. And then logical consequences, which is basically like, if Jeff messes up the cafeteria, then his consequence is to help clean up in the cafeteria. If some kid does something in the bathroom, and we've done this year, we've gotten back to it, they stay after school and they work with the custodians to clean the bathroom with parent approval. So we started doing this work in 2018, 2019, and then, like all good things in life, COVID destroyed everything. So we were really building a lot of momentum at Old Orchard around this kind of proactive approach. Right before COVID hit, we had a lot of really solid teacher leaders around restorative justice and restorative practices. And really, when we came out of the pandemic, some people moved into administration and left the district, but really it was just like, how do we survive? And a lot of it became very survivalistic instead of really being able to focus on, there were more basic needs that kids had that kind of helped draw our attention away and hurt restorative justice moving forward. And so really, what we're looking at now as a school, you can think of restorative justice and restorative practices in this kind of tiered approach where the horse pulling the cart is really that building and strengthening relationships piece. So that's where we're at, right now. And we're only focusing on circles, which is to say we're focusing on everything that circles involves. And so this is my inclusion of the most awkward junior high picture of a circle that I have, with kids trying to shrink away and hide their faces in Miss Hickey's class. But going back to kind of how to frame this for the board issue, I think when people talk to me about, the punishment piece and all these other things, what I really tell them is that all of this is really focused on defining an ideal student in a different way. And what I mean by that is when we think about what a circle does and how it's intended to make kids feel, it's intended to make them feel like, one, they're equal, right? There's no cliques. There's no, popular kids and unpopular kids or smart kids or, not so smart, it gets rid of all of the kind of things that are, quite frankly, very natural to the junior high mind. And it really focuses on the fact of what we think an ideal student is somebody that can sit in a circle, can put down all of their kind of baggage and listen and talk to one another, right? So when I think of like the district's ideal, graduate profile, like the circle is really about, we want kids who are inclusive. Like we want kids where they understand equity, not as like a theoretical concept, because they're practicing it once a week or twice a week in this kind of circle setting, right? And so Bluey's dad, just to provide context, so with staff at the beginning of the year, we kind of use this I use this example of how we all, everybody in this room, like when they think of themselves in some role, for me, father, right? There are always times in my life where I feel like I'm not worthy of this position, right? I can't believe my kids don't just run away or something. And I use the example of Bluey's dad as like, when I do something like Bluey's dad, I don't know if you've seen the show, it's incredibly therapeutic. Then I feel like I'm worthy. And the idea of circles is to kind of notch down all of those things that kids think that they should be and really give them an ideal type that's like, listen, it's not that hard. You just have to be a good human who's like listening and talking to one another, not fighting over the talking piece, and having like a civil, engaged conversation. So that's Bluey's dad. We're trying to make a different version of Bluey's dad with an ideal student. And so now to our current work. So again, I'm putting cards up to kind of tap into the district's strategic plan. But there are really kind of 5 major circle types that we're focused on at Old Orchard this year. The primary one, and we started off the year with a 3-week plan where kids were doing circles 3 times a week for each of the 3 weeks and kind of running through these different types. The main focus is that proactive or community building circle. And that's really when, for example, in this plan, it was kids getting in a circle and saying like what norms they thought the classroom should follow, right? And then there was like a specific circle routine. They're all kind of scripted. That was about how do you think of the term respect, right? We live in Skokie where respect means 100 different things, like depending on where kids are coming from and what their background is. And so the idea of the proactive community building circles are really to form bonds around those important things about the community, and really to just kind of build relationships and make that our number 1 priority. Academic circles are just like the name kind of implies. It's really the idea that once you get kids into this routine of being able to sit down, you can do that with anything, including what you're learning in class. The beauty of an academic circle is that instead of, the smart kid piping up and taking over the show, everybody's right there. Like everybody's equal and they can add their voice to the conversation. Talking circles, we did one of these a couple of weeks ago that was about hallways. So it's just about a topic and getting multiple perspectives about a topic. Understanding circle is really thinking about how can we understand a specific issue better and actually think about action steps. And then a celebration circle, again, as the name implies, is just a time to like recognize kids for doing celebratory things. So I have 3, honestly, pillars of Old Orchard Junior High School here. So Dave Wibiat from 6th grade, Matt Tominelli from 7th grade, Diego Marin for 8th grade, and I'm going to give them a chance to kind of give the teacher perspective. I asked them not to talk about all the different circle types, but just one that they really value. We're going to go in order, Dave. I need you first.
So I had an issue in my community building class where 2 students were really frustrated about 2 different things and wound up getting frustrated with each other. So after talking to both the students, I realized that frustration was the central problem. So we had a circle the next day discussing what frustration was, what frustrates them, how do they feel when they're frustrated. And they were all surprised. Mike Kelly, the assistant principal, gave us a little signal where when you agree with somebody in a circle, because only one person talks at a time, is to give one of these where you point at the person and you do it. And they noticed everything that they were saying that was frustrating them when they had a talking piece, 3, 4, or sometimes the whole circle was pointing at them. So they realized that frustration was universal to everyone. And after they got all that frustration out, unfortunately, community is 20 minutes. We're like, oh, what do we do now? And we're like, oh, I guess we'll talk about that tomorrow. So I had one of the social workers come up, and she sat in our circle and started talking about different ways that people can deal with their frustration. Kids shared their ideas, she shared their ideas. We kind of voted on some that we could practice in the classroom, and that was really beneficial too. And at the end of that, with about 5 minutes to go, the student asked for the talking piece and said, is it weird to be frustrated about death? Which was completely devoid of what we're talking about. But he felt comfortable enough that something was happening in his life that was frustrating him because his aunt was in hospice. He's like, I'm frustrated about this, and I don't know what to do. So the empathy that was shown by the kids, because they were just talking about frustration, how to deal with frustration, counting to 10 wasn't going to do it. You know, taking a moment, using a meta moment wasn't going to do it. So they they basically almost instinctively realized it's not about giving him something he can do, it's letting him know that we are there for him. And the social worker was there, she made an appointment with him, checked in with him. The kids, for the next couple of days, were checking in with him. But it was just one of those things that, because they built this kind of ability to feel safe, sharing something that's really personal, and it's really deep. To go, from an argument that happened in class, to get to the point where they're saying, I'm frustrated about death. So, and then when his aunt unfortunately passed away, he came back. The kids in the class said, we need to have a circle for Juan to talk about. To talk with him and let him know that we care and what he needs from us. So I think that's one of the things that's just really powerful about circle.
As a 7th grade special education teacher, I have students that have varying needs of social emotional support. So my goal in the beginning of the year was to use proactive circles to get them comfortable talking with each other, being able to share, and take some risks in sharing and be vulnerable. And I feel like it's paid off because in the last few weeks, we've had a couple of situations, one in the world with what's going on in Israel, and we had students that had varying opinions on the first day, and we were able to sit down in a circle and really kind of talk about where people were coming from and understand the different perspectives. And it was a very productive conversation where I think people backed off of their positions, listened to other people. I don't know that we resolved anything because I'm not sure it's resolvable, but people were able to, the students were able to talk to each other in a way that they left what they had heard from parents and maybe on the news at home. And that was I kind of was sitting back facilitating this conversation, and it was very powerful to watch. They far exceeded my expectations of being able to just say, okay, I hear what you're saying, and I get it. And then my counterpart, the other 7th grade special education teacher, had a baby, and it was more unexpected than we all were expecting. And so we share students. And, when a teacher's gone for a long period of time, she's been gone for about a week, her students in that class have been having some difficulty with subs being in the classroom. And because we share the same students, we had kind of a restorative circle today for some of the students to talk with the other students about their frustrations of their behavior in class with the substitute. It was also very powerful to watch students tell other students, when you do this with the sub, it affects me. And it's been a great thing. Like I said, they far exceeded my expectations. I was expecting this to take a longer road, but they've been very open and honest and direct, and it's been kind of an amazing thing to watch. These two things have happened in these last 2 weeks, and it's bolstered my, that I'm gonna definitely hit the circles more frequently in my classrooms because they're working pretty effectively.
You should all notice that Diego's wearing his ID. Just to make sure everyone knows I actually work here. So I'm not gonna lie, I was a little hesitant
hesitant from the math teacher perspective of like how I'm gonna incorporate this in my classroom. I'm always cut for time, right, trying to get through content, and it has done a lot of great things for me this year. We kind of built it into our routine, we do it once a week for now, and the kids really look forward to it, really look forward to in a space where we're rigorously working on math and, doing a lot of non-social aspects in our classroom. They look forward to this time to just be able to, one, have someone or a classroom listen, right, disconnect from everything, but then two, like the chance for them to just speak whatever's on their mind. I outside of teaching, I also do a lot of coaching, and we do a lot of circles. We just call it something else. We just call time out. We huddle up, right? We talk about what works, what doesn't work, what adjustments we have to make to kind of give ourselves a chance to win. And I bring that concept into the classroom. It just looks a little different. We've done academic circles before. We've done community building circles before. We've done fishbowl circles before. But I'm really trying to get the kids to understand that we're all just kind of part of the same team. I know in the past when I try to redirect kids or ask kids to stay after class to address behavior or step outside the classroom to talk about something that happened, the immediate reaction is like, am I in trouble? What did I do? It wasn't me. And I feel like a lot of the time now, especially this year, since we've been doing circles, it's like, oh, he just wants to talk. Like there's just a positive, reaction that we get from kids, and we just want to talk to them about something that we have to correct. So it really has changed the dynamic of the typical math classroom. The kids look forward to it. If we don't do it for whatever reason that week, they're like, well, when are we going to do it? Right? So it's like the kids remind me all the time. But really, like I said, it kind of brings this whole equality thing that Greg was talking about in terms of like we're all in this together. There's no distractions. There's like, everyone's focused on whoever's speaking. And like I said, it's just done a lot of great things for our classroom.
Thanks, Diego. This is the first time I've heard anything about circles at the school. Sadly, I'm not there to listen to them. So these teachers are amazing people. I'm just very happy to hear these anecdotes. But I think to highlight the teachers, one of the things that we've been very explicit about with them is that this is just the first step. So I'm going to keep returning to the horse pulling the cart piece because really this lays the foundation for doing some pretty radical things in school. And this was a survey that I gave teachers, which just asked them, given your experience with circles, are you ready to learn more? Or do you need more time with circles? And the response is pretty overwhelming in terms of moving forward. You may be thinking, well, there's another side to this coin, and that's the kids. And so I did not videotape children because we're very early in this process, but I did want to share some of what they have said via survey about circles so far. I put a line in the middle there because I'm not naive about the fact that this is a magic pill that everybody's taking. But on the top there, I just tried to pull out some characteristic statements that were a type that I saw throughout the survey. Really this feeling connected with others piece, I think, is really the key. This particular cell says, let us get to know people. The point about getting to show my identity, the fun piece that kind of Diego's pointing out, and even the practical side of it's nice to have a break sometime. And then if you look at the bottom, I'm not one to cover warts. There are definitely some things that we still have to work on in terms of making sure that all teachers are kind of up to the level of these three, learning how to really move the conversation along. And there are definitely kids who think it's boring. There are definitely kids who think everything's boring. But I definitely like the I'm allergic to school. But really, for this early in the year, I just wanted to know whether or not kids felt like, we've been doing this for 7 weeks now. One of the keys is really whether or not you're gaining a different perspective of the kids who you're with. And while this isn't, like an amazing, everybody says 5, I really do think of things in terms of a tipping point, right? You just need 50% of the kids above the mat level in order to kind of charge forward. And that's part of our future work here. So, where is it going? We're going to have some cohorts. Dr. Samajedi is kind of a district-wide effort to turn Monday meeting times and kind of these focused PD sessions where people are going to be focusing on specific topics. So we're going to have a circle cohort that's actually going to be led by 2 teachers. That's starting, in a couple of weeks, and we'll run through the fall. In this second bullet, I think is key, especially for kids. We're really going to work around identifying kids who are real leaders in this area and supporters of this work, because really it's their voice in the end, I think, that's going to be able to get their classmates to understand the significance of it. And then we're also looking at, I put all these hearts on here to connect to the district strategic plan. I probably missed most of the hearts. But to really have some, info sessions for parents, because there are tons of like the affective statement piece, giving kids 3 options instead of telling them what to do. Like there are all these discrete skills that really are wrapped into the restorative mindset that we're hoping can tie in between home and the school. So again, remember the horse. Okay, people that are like, you're not punishing kids, just remember it's all about all these fantastic relationship building efforts that make the need for punishment not null, but rather not the focus. That's all about harm in relationships. Do you have any questions?
Thank you for being awesome.
Yeah.
I try, Sleep deprivation. You guys should. Thank you very much.
Thanks, teachers.
And our next superintendent report is Dr. Sam Chidney, who's going to speak to us about our Student Achievement Day.
Yes, not as exciting as circles, as do not have any horses or carts.
Are we still talking about Ryan's deviance?
Yes, we can say that. And stealing from Ryan, thank you for having me. All right, so I want to always start off with kind of talking about who our students are. This is actually a picture from our EL exit celebration at Old Orchard that we had just a couple of weeks ago. So see, these are some of the kiddos that exited the EL program based on their access scores. So it's just kind of fun to see their smile. So they're a great representation of who our students are in the district. So diversity of our student race and ethnicity, you can see in 2023, we really stay pretty much the same as where we've been before. All this information is reported on the 2023 preliminary school report card. In terms of additional student designations, mobility, low income, English learner rate, and special education, again, stay fairly similar, a little dip in mobility, a little increase in low income English learners, and a small little dip in special education. So not huge changes in who our kids are. We have received our summative designations. All 4 of our schools are in the commendable. And in my memo, I mentioned that it was released to us, and then they cautioned that there might have been a mistake and wait please for further notification. And since then they have issued another communication saying they are final. So they started us in commendable, and that's where we're staying. So all 4 schools are in commendable, and that's really where the vast majority of school districts fall in terms of the summative designations. So where do they get these designations? They come from Academic indicators, about 75% comes from a mix of things within the academic side, and then 25% comes from school quality and student success indicators. There are 3 of those indicators that are not in effect yet. They'll kick in 2025. We're still kind of learning what that means and how they're measuring some of those pieces. Some of the P2 and 3.8 indicators are going to be based on grades. So there's not like how many students have received an A, a B, or a C. But they haven't really talked about how that's measured when we don't report those kinds of grades, right? So standards-based grading, what does that look like? So still kind of waiting on some clarity around those pieces, and we'll bring that information to you when we have it. So I want to share with you our IAR progress. Again, this is 3rd grade through 8th grade. Students are tested in English language arts and in math. It is computer-based. We get results that are provided in terms of proficiency, so how many students met or exceeded standards, and then also growth measures, so how students grew from one IR administration to the next. And 65% of our school designation comes from the IR assessment. So here is a chart showing you our progress this year in 2023. We are at 29% of students showing proficiency on math compared to the state of Illinois, which was at 27%. So we had a little bit of an increase from 2022. We're working our way up, trying to get back to where we were pre-COVID. This is the percent proficient for ELA. Had a nice little increase there from 2022 to 2023, and we're about even with the state. This is our proficiency by subgroups. Can't see that far away. So you can see we've got a breakdown here for English learners, our students with IEPs, and our low-income students. And we have, for the most part, looking at the blue in 2023, some increases from the previous school year. So we also, as I mentioned, receive information on our growth percentile. Students are given a percentile or a growth range between 1 and 99. 50, a score 50 is considered to be average and expected growth for each year. So in math, for this school year, we're at 53, a score of 53 as an average. And then in ELA, a score of 51. Both of those a little bit above where the state is. I want to share with you our OEDA, our access for ELL scores. Again, this is looking at English language proficiency in 4 different domains. We give this assessment in January, February each school year. All students who are in the EL program take this assessment until they pass, until they exit out with a 4.8. Students who parents refuse services, so they qualify for the program, but parents refuse services, still have to take the assessment. So anyone who qualifies the program takes the assessment, and it is kindergarten through 8th grade. So there are several different proficiency levels that students score within based on their English proficiency. This chart shows you where our students are in those levels. We always like to see students that are in moving into that expanding range. The blue is a 4.0 to a 4.9. Again, 4.8 is where they exit the program. And then obviously the bridging and the reaching, the 2 different green colors there are students that are reaching monolingual proficiency status. So we had a jump in from 2019 to 2022, and we attributed that to our newcomer students that started to enroll last year, and we've stayed about where we were last year. I believe we have 45 newcomers that are on our rosters right now. The state also provides information on how English learners are exiting and what your exit rate is. Our exit rate is just under 10%. The state is a little bit lower than that. They also identify students, the number of students that you have that have been in the program for more than 7 years. So English learners, typically, research says that it takes 5 to 7 years for students to reach English proficiency. So students who are in the program 7 years or longer are considered long-term EL. So you want to start looking at what additional supports or scaffolds might be needed for those students. Why aren't they exiting out? What's kind of holding them back? So we have 11 students in the district that fit that qualification. We also receive fairly new information from the state called Progress to Proficiency. And again, ISB uses a 100-point scale to measure what they call adequate growth towards a 5-year expected timeline to exit EL programming. That counts for 5% of our summative school designation. And they look again at growth versus expected growth in students' composite access scores. So in 2023, we had 65% of our students that are in that. I can't read that far. It's time for new classes. That are in that area of 70 points or more towards proficiency, so really making really good gains. So this chart shows us that our kids are making really nice progress in their growth towards proficiency. And then we always want to show our EL status in terms of IR proficiency. So you can see math on the left and ELA on the right. And there is data there for how all students performed, how not EL students performed. So those are students who do not speak a second language, or potentially did speak a second language and were scored but did not qualify for the program. So they still could speak a second language at home, they just didn't qualify for the program. So they're not ELs. ELs who are currently in the program, and then former ELs who have been in the program and who have exited. And you can see that our former ELs, the students who have been in the program, are performing really well and outperforming our all students category. And for the most part, outperforming our not EL category. So, you know, that's what research says. You know, students who are dual or triple language really excel academically once they have those strong foundational skills in all of the languages. Oops, not too far. The ISA, the science assessment, the assessment that we get the least amount of information. This is literally the only information I have from the state of Illinois for how our students performed. And it's just how many students achieved a performance level of proficient or exemplary. We had quite a bit of a dip in our 8th grade results compared to last year. Obviously, it's not the same group of students, it's a different group of students. We're a little bit surprised at these results, but we are very excited that we have adopted a new science curriculum for the junior high that's much better aligned to standards, and I know that Old Orchard science teachers will be digging into that curriculum and they'll want to see a change here as well. But unfortunately, I don't have much context to really explain what these scores mean in terms of how they fall within the different domains of science. We get none of that information. It is supposedly going to be coming to us soon. They're going to change the way they report. They just have not done that yet. All right, so this is our first year of full iReady implementation, and it replaces our NWA MAP diagnostic. It's very similar to MAP. All of the administrative pieces are the same. It's a diagnostic, although it does come with an instructional platform. MAP did not. We give it 3 times a year. We assess kindergarten through 8th grade in math and in reading. It's nationally normed, it's adaptive, and it provides growth and proficiency measures for us. So a reminder, I shared this with you back in the spring when we brought this to you for adoption. Our student performance is measured on a scale between 100 and 800. And then student growth is identified in 2 ways. Typical growth is identified for students when they take the diagnostic assessment, so how much they should typically grow by the end of the school year. And then stretch growth is an additional growth measure that helps close the academic gap for students who are placed below grade level. And typically 20 to 30% of students make that stretch goal in one academic year. So these were our results in our initial testing. So I gave you the overall placement results for reading is the first little chart, and then I'm showing you the placement by domain. So reading is made up of phonological awareness, phonics, high frequency words, et cetera, so you can kind of see where students are falling. The green areas are students that are on grade level and above grade level. The yellow area is considered to be 1 grade below. But the caution with fall testing is that they're really testing against end of year standards. So students who are falling in there aren't necessarily really 1 year below grade level, if that makes sense, right? So in the winter, those kids, we're going to hope shifting into the green, and that yellow, our consultants have said, don't get so worried about yellow at this moment. That also means that the red, and then the stripy red, that's our name for it. Those kids are identified as 2 years below, and the stripy red is 3 years below. So those kids are also not quite that much below grade level, because again, they're being assessed by end of year standards. So what we're doing with this information is we are using grade level data to analyze where kids are, how they're walking in the door to us, and then what areas need to be focused on in particular. So each grade level at the elementaries identified a particular area in reading and a particular area in math, and here is math, to have as a grade level goal. So then they develop an instructional plan around that goal, and they are using common assessments and instructional techniques and having conversations in their PLC meetings, and they're monitoring the goal to see how they're progressing. And then so when we have winter testing in December, then they'll be monitoring to see how kids are making movement in those goals. Any questions? It's a lot of data.
Well, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the red stripey section.
Yeah, red stripey.
Are we to understand that the red stripe section for reading and math is that 18% of our students are falling into 2 to 3 grade levels lower? And do these data break down the categories of students in the same way that the data above do in terms of English language learner,
They do,
things like that.
yes.
It's not here, but when you dig further into that, you're looking at that red stripe population and the different layers within that population.
Correct. So that was an asterisk on the data when we had conversations with principals and when principals had conversations with teachers. This includes, so when building principals get their building report that looks like this, and Devonshire can pull up their third grade report. They can see kid names and who is in which color designation. So one of the things that we talk about with them is identifying students who are your newcomers. They're probably in those colors. Who are your students that potentially have IEPs in reading or math? They could potentially be in those colors. So really kind of looking at the contextual pieces of who the students are in those areas. Not to say, oh, well, that's a newcomer, we're not going to worry about them, but it does give some context to why maybe students are in some of those groups and then what services we're providing to them that helps move them out of that. I didn't provide you the data on breaking down the demographics because with the change to Infinite Campus, we're having some Clever issues. Clever is our automatic rostering system, and we're not able to segregate the data by the demographics in iReady until the Clever issue is resolved. So we're having to literally look at student names and identify them in groups. Not able to break down the data that way yet, but we will be able to. Derek's working on it.
So the real takeaway additional to that is that this is initial. This is kind of the students coming.
This is a baseline.
Baseline.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. It's startling, when you see the red and then the stripy red. Yeah, absolutely. So our goal is to shrink that by winter and really that targeted instruction. The teachers know exactly which kids are in which of the 5 different levels in their classroom.
So if I were a child who was right at grade level at the end of last year, and then I take the fall test, chances are I'm not going to be right at grade level anymore. Correct. Because I'm being measured against the end of year standards. Correct. For that year. So, the accurate place for me to be would be potentially, assuming I was right at grade level at the end of the year, would be potentially that one in that yellow zone, 1 year behind.
Right.
It's not as devastating in practicality as it looks because it's this transition from spring to fall.
Yeah.
So even a student that is coming in at 3 grade levels, that might not literally be 3 grade levels. It could be, okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Noel?
I find this really fascinating because I don't feel like you can get a district perspective on here, but again, that doesn't seem to me to be the utility. It seems to be much more that a teacher can take a look at where their students are and be able to group them and plan around those particular things, which seems incredibly powerful. So that I think is good to know. It kind of seems a bit odd to me it's nice to have a baseline so we can see as an entire district where we're going with it, but it seems like it would look really, really different with kindergartners versus, 7th graders that have been having that too, right? So those are not, I just wanted to I assume those data are going to look vastly different for not just by which kids in a particular classroom, but also what grade they're in and how long they've been in the district, etc. Right?
Correct. So to that point, actually, in looking at the literacy results, we also, as part of leadership, broke it down by grade level and looked at the grade level pictures. And one of the things that we noticed with 4th grade was their phonics domain. We had a pretty good chunk in red. Phonics, 4th grade. Shouldn't really be that way.
But they had COVID and COVID.
They were kindergartners. And 1st graders, in COVID. And so the reading specialist and I have already been in the works and talking and thinking about, okay, they missed some phonics and some foundational phonics instruction. Some of those kids did. The kids who were kindergartners in COVID in the first year, some of those children never stepped foot in our classes. They were fully remote, right? So that's that you hear about unfinished learning coming out of COVID, and that's a perfect example of a group of kids that now that we have this assessment, we can see that there's a gap there for them. Map data did not show us that.
And you'll be able to show us again, like through time, how this stuff shifts too. Right?
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Needs more hearts.
Hearts.
I need to steal that from her.
Oh, boy.
I like the heart.
Just one cerebral thread that goes through the entire presentation. It's
Thank you so much. All right. Our final superintendent reports.
I do have a small list of good news here. Actually, it's a good sized list. I'll try to run through it relatively quickly since the evening's getting on. Tomorrow, if you saw my communications yesterday, the day before, is Principal Appreciation.
We appreciate the one principal who showed up. And the three of you as well. I'm sure you're watching it.
They're all parent teacher.
Bless you.
We greatly appreciate our principals and hope our community does as much as we do. Second thing, also Old Orchard related, and I think I included this in the communication to the board, but I just wanted to share it in a public board meeting. We talked a lot about vaping last spring and our alarm with the number of kids. I think as of a few weeks ago, there was less than a handful even of kids who have been caught vaping in our bathrooms. So that feels like a great success story, considering how many kids that we seem to be having engaging in that spring. Of course, Dragon team is looking to see if there's some alternate location.
Check under the bleachers.
But so far it's looking pretty good. So again, I applaud the board for supporting that decision to put those devices there. Third thing is, if you'll recall, we applied for a Preschool for All grant some months ago, and just this week we got news that we received it in the amount of $253,000 a year for 2 years. So about $500,000 influx of money into the school district. After those 2 years, I believe we have the opportunity to reapply to see if we can continue getting that. It cannot be used for construction purposes. But it does, it does allow us to pay for some of the other things like teachers that we normally pay for out of our regular budget, which then frees money up that will be depleted or reduced as a result of the facility. So $500,000 increase over the next 2 years in the budget is a great thing. And Sharon and Ryan and I have a webinar with them to find out what are the rules on how it can be spent. We're confident that it's going to be a positive contribution to the budget and the district. Another grant note, Sabiha Patel from the Parent Center had written a grant to the Skokie Community Fund to help fund her new Paris program. She received a grant in the amount of $10,000 to do that, which is fantastic news. So really happy and proud about that. And then the last thing real quick, Old Orchard has their community cultural night next Friday night, the 27th from 5 till 7. It's their second annual one. And last year was great. We had a really great turnout. So if you can make it out Friday evening to come and check it out, please.
Open to the public.
Yep. That's great. Yeah. All right. That's it for superintendent reports.
Thank you. We move on to the reading and acceptance of minutes. May I have a motion?
I call a motion to approve the minutes from the September 21st, 2023 Board of Education regular session meeting.
Second.
This was the Ryan Bird Killer meeting.
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Warsaw,
Yes.
Bill Jordan.
Yes.
Thank you. The consent agenda is our next item of business. Does any member wish to remove any item for separate consideration? No, may I have a motion?
Go ahead, please. I call for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, which includes the personnel report authorizing the leave of absence of licensed staff, hire, change of status, resignation, and retirement of classified staff, financial reports, pay orders, and expenditures.
Monroe. Yes. Lefner,
Yes.
Stearns,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Warsaw,
Yes.
Bill Jordan.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
We move on to our reports and discussion items. You see in front of you the ISD Resolution Committee report.
So it's also attached in the board book we did that this afternoon. It's got a paper copy here. Apparently, they used to mail us the booklets, and then we distributed them to all of you. Apparently, they decided not to do that anymore. So this is a smaller packet than the mail.
Only 5 up for discussion.
So at the November board meeting would be when you would sort of discuss any items where there was, where basically you feel like you would like to discuss it. And then 2 days later, Annie goes to Triple I conference, to the delegate assembly, and represents the district.
With only 5, you'll spend more time testing the clickers than actually voting, I presume. But yeah, Annie will be collecting our votes.
Okay, so everyone should email them to me.
Yeah.
When and what? When do you use the
Hold on, I'm just
But tonight, midnight.
midnight tonight?
yes.
I get so dumb.
Have them to me by the 13th.
Great.
And then one easy way to do that is just on the tally sheet in the back, you can probably just take a picture of it.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. Or you could just put like 1 yes, 2 no, whatever you want. Cool.
November
You said by 13.
16th or 13th, I'm sorry.
13th.
Annie, in my experience, I'd probably send a reminder out.
I will tell you who you should send it to, but
Clearly I heard 16 and she said 13 twice. So. Put it on the calendar.
Wonderful. All right. No other questions there? Straightforward. Moving on to our IGA with the village.
Okay, so as I sort of previewed last spring when we decided to install the video cameras throughout the schools, in part to allow police to be able to have access in an emergency, I had said that we would need to have an intergovernmental agreement with them in order to be able to do that. So we had our attorney craft one. He kind of put everything at the kitchen sink in his first version of it, and we've since pared it down with Jeff's help. We had some additional stuff about police being able to retain information, and then if they get a FOIA for it, what would happen? At the end of the day, talking to our attorney again, he said, really, that's not necessary to have. If there is an event where we have to have the police come in and be able to access that camera, and there's a crime going on in the building, if they need the footage, they'll subpoena that and get it from us in that manner. And apart from that, if they don't have information that's not through a subpoena, they can't be FOIA'd for it either. The FOIA would come to us, and then we would consult our attorneys to find out what part, if any, of the FOIA we would be obligated to respond to. I think to date, we've had buses or video cameras on buses for well over a decade, and I don't think we've ever been FOIA'd for anything there either. So, not to say it can't happen, but it's a rarity to get those kind of FOIAs. Any questions? All right. This will come back at the November board meeting for formal approval.
Okay. Moving on to our ed red.
There was an EdRed meeting. It was actually really interesting. It was yesterday. It was on serving new arrivals, students entering populations. It's something that I know we've all been reading about in the news across our area and across the country. The largest number of local legislators or staffers from those legislators that I've ever seen at one of these meetings, at least percentage-wise. It was a special meeting. It wasn't one of the regular monthly, so the total number was a little lower. I'm guessing a quarter of the participants were staffers or legislators themselves. It's definitely a hot button topic for the schools that are part of the EdRed consortium. And again, those are suburban school districts trying to have one voice in lobbying downstate. The two big takeaways for me was what the specific ask is that EdRed is making. They're lobbying hard downstate. And they're asking for a $35 million grant, effectively, for suburban public schools, serving students who are attending American public schools for the first time. One of the main points that they raised to support this is additional funding has been given in all kinds of different areas, both geographically around the state and then also topically around the state. And there's never been additional funding for our community for new arrival students. So this would be a first impression to do something like this, and it's timely. Second big takeaway is the importance of language and terminology. We've heard immigrant, migrant, refugee, new arrival. And the reason it's important to just characterize it that way is when it comes to the school, it's important simply that it is a student who is entering an American school for the first time. Even among those different subgroups, there are so many unique distinctions. You know, to say someone is a refugee really doesn't tell you much because you have no idea what that means, what country they're from, what experience they have. And regardless of what legal category they fall into, the school is going to have to do the same frontline assessment, placement, and then work to address whatever those individual students' needs are. The main speaker was State Representative Fred Crespo. He talked about his work bringing this before the legislature and lobbying for this. I guess not lobbying, he's a legislator, but working on this since early this calendar year. There were a number of different school district staff who spoke. The one that I paid most attention to was District 62 in Des Plaines. And we, as I understand it, have been rather fortunate that we have had new arrivals, which is wonderful, but we have not been hit by a gigantic wave at one time that overwhelmed our staff and our district. I wouldn't say District 62 was very clear that they have not been overwhelmed, but in a 12-month period, they had an influx of 330 students who were primarily Russian and Ukrainian speakers, first new arrival students. That adds up to 1 in 13 of their students are new arrivals, Russian, Ukrainian speakers. And their estimate for the cost, when you count all the services, all the supports, all the staffing, nearly $8 million just for one district. So I completely understand why this is so central in what EdRed is working on right now, and it was just a very informative meeting. So hopefully they'll have some success and they'll continue to keep us posted.
And when I attended the regional meeting this spring, I think it's Wheeling had an additional 2 or 3 classrooms.
Yeah,
They had a very large.
and different districts talked about having to bring in modular classrooms, literally running out of footed square feet to create modular classrooms when that was necessary. Just and the influx comes very quickly if it does.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff. Move on to the draft of the school calendar for 24-25.
It's hard to, I don't know.
Quarter of the way through this.
Pardon me?
Through the quarter of the way through the century, 2025.
I can't tell you how many times I miswrote the year on here because because it's just the idea that 24, 25 just kind of blew me away. So you have a draft calendar in front of you. No real big surprises. Some holidays shift into weekends, so they're not off, and others come out of weekends, so they're off. There is new legislation that makes election days a school holiday, even to the point where we can't have an institute day, because that's what we had done last year. I believe we had an institute day and election day, so kids weren't there. But now they want election day to be a school holiday. That's here in Illinois. I know there's some countries that election day is a day off. For everybody, if you want to get out and vote, it's not a bad idea. Let's see. The other surprise was Eid al-Fitr now has migrated to the day after spring break, that Monday, potentially. It's usually we get it right about half the time just because of the way it's identified. But that makes our spring break extra long this year, which I'm sure will be not unwelcome to anyone. But yeah, no real big changes here. Nothing too exciting. Any questions?
When do other districts in the area bring their school calendar for this year? And are we all on the same schedule, like surrounding districts in Skokie and in neighboring communities?
Yeah, so there is no uniform time to create a school calendar. Everybody kind of has their own timeline and pattern of doing it. Some school districts do it 2 and 3 years at a time. I think that's the minority. Most of them do it kind of 1 year at a time, and they start looking at it around this time of year. This is maybe a little bit early. We've gone anywhere between a first draft in October to a first draft in, say, November, December, but it's usually always approved by January, simply because parents, staff members start having questions, so to plan vacations and things like that. So,
I don't know about how it's done. Do you coordinate with 219?
So basically, we have a set of guidelines between all 219 and all the feeder districts. So there's it's agreements around certain things, like when winter break will fall, when spring break will fall, the week that everybody will start coming back to school. It's not a specific day, but it's a week. 219 has sort of their own subset of rules. They start earlier. So there is sort of a coordinated set of guidelines. It's not to say that all of our calendars are the same or equal. Some of our other districts in the area don't take religious holidays.
Right.
So, so that creates a difference. Their school year would look to be shorter, but we have a long history of taking these religious holidays.
Yeah.
And we still go to school the same amount of days, so the kids get the same amount of learning.
Yeah.
The school year is a little bit longer, but it's the same amount of days off, same amount of learning.
I was thinking, like, how do the spring and winter breaks line up between like 68 and 65 or 68 and 70? Like 69. Like
It's usually there's sort of some common thinking around how the schedules are made. So for the most part, everybody in the area outside of our township is pretty close.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'll see spring break be a different week.
Yeah. I have kids in 65 and 68, so that's why I asked.
Yeah.
It's
But we don't collaborate with them, and they're probably not looking at our calendar when they make their decisions either.
I have a question.
Yes.
So the 11th is parent-teacher conferences.
The 11th of
October. That is Yom Kippur. So what is the other day that is going to be designated for conferences to ensure everybody can access it?
Well, there's 2 days for conferences. for
Right,
each school.
yeah.
There's the evening ones, and then there's the daytime ones.
So what are the evening ones?
The evening ones are the night before. It says 10 EL right there.
Yeah.
That's elementary.
Also be on the board.
Yeah.
Sunset.
You can't.
our split.
24.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 24, 25 year. Thank you.
Okay. Let us
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, no. It begins on sundown on the 11th.
Correct.
It
Okay.
ends on the 12th.
Okay. I thought we had taken all those things into account. Okay. Great. Any other questions? I mean, you will every once in a while see a school district that starts winter break a week off of where we do, or spring break. Typically, I'd say 90% of school districts have similar breaks when it comes to those things, because there's usually some decision rules based on, what day does Christmas fall on to figure out when winter break starts, or
And we tend to line up spring break with 219,
yes.
which is probably preferable.
I think all of our winter and spring breaks line up at 219. That's a uniform thing. That's sort of part of the uniform agreement of when those are. It's that start date that is different with 219.
My CPS family never have the same spring break as we do.
Yeah. And then there's no decision rules about what kind of holidays are observed, because each school district observes a different
Did Pulaski Day until
that's been six, 7 years ago. All right. So we will bring this back in November for final approval.
And then after it snows, if we have to change it.
Oh, okay.
All right, moving on to some action items. Someone's been waiting for.
All right, well, we have for approval tonight what we'll call phase one of the building of an early childhood center. Phase one primarily involves the architectural fees for the design of the facility. Ryan and Sharon and I met with two of the architects last Friday to start getting into the nitty gritty of what we would want to be incorporated into that new design. We really want something that's going to be a beautiful facility, that's going to be a showcase for the district, that's going to provide our kids and families with the best possible service. When the architects came at that last meeting, they showed sort of a template with 10 classrooms, so you could sort of see the footprint of what it was going to be. The reality is, once we put the design elements that we want to have in place there, it'll probably be, say, 7-ish classrooms with a lot of these other features that are built in. I'll let maybe Ryan share some of those features, just some of the things that we've been talking about building, or Sharon, I know you were probably dying to jump into, since you built part of that, most of that wish list. Yes.
Did you want me to talk about the wish list?
Does it have windows?
It has windows. I actually had it as a bullet, and Jim laughed at me. He's like, "We know, Sharon, windows." And I also put blinds on the windows, and he said that was an obvious thing.
Sorry, just a point of order. I do believe we need to suggest a motion. So if I could get to the next item is the approval of the architectural fees for phase one of the construction of an early childhood center as an addition to Old Orchard at an estimated cost of $697,000. $697 and two. How do I say this number? $697,002. 0.00. May I have a motion?
Sure, I'll try it too. I'll call for a motion to approve the architectural fees for phase one of the construction of an early childhood center as an addition to Old Orchard Junior High at an estimated cost of $697,002. $697,002.
Ruffner?
Oh, not yet.
Not yet. No, now we discuss. It doesn't happen too often.
Yes, we're looking at windows. Different offices, different sized offices for, say, speech pathologists who might meet with multiple kids, as opposed to a psychologist or social worker who might work a little smaller. Looking at putting in a community / physical activity type
Multi-purpose
room that will allow kids an indoor option to run, play, ride tricycles. That was a big point of interest on the wish list as well.
It's a big part of the preschool for all grant. Tricycle riding.
Yes.
So you can use it for that kind of stuff? Like you can use it for supplies?
Each classroom will have a toilet room attached to it, a very tiny toilet, as well as a calming space, that will be in between most of the rooms, so kind of a shared calming space. So if, you know, a lot of our, EC students are special needs and sometimes just need to calm down with their big emotions. Little bodies, big emotions, you know, yes, who doesn't exactly? As Dr. Garwood mentioned, the fees are associated with the architect to kind of start that building, which is part of our contract with them. They want to make sure if they're going to put in hours and hours and hours that they want to get paid. And this dollar amount gets us all the way up to the bidding process, you know, creating all those documents, all those bid documents. Architect did mention that the timeline that they originally created and shared with us in June would be extended a little bit. They need extra time. We currently have surveyors out. I don't know if any of you have been around, you know, all the schools the last couple of weeks, but you know, men in orange jackets and the little poles standing out there all over the place. Hopefully tonight we get the approval to proceed, and then a lot of the other programming design. We'll probably do a few site visits to some of the other elementary or early childhood areas to see what else we can include.
One of the things that you know, we're really advocating for is an indoor play area for kids too. So you know, imagine you've got sort of that soft rubberized floor, you know, made of recycled materials, and then you have sort of the you know, the swings, the kinds of things that kids would play on outside, indoors in an atrium kind of environment. It's great for observations of, you know, play-based assessments and just having a place for kids to be able to go and have physical activity, especially in days when it's really cold, because you know, you've all been parents before and they had to get preschoolers dressed before. Imagine getting a whole classroom full of them dressed to go outside for a few minutes in the snow and then getting them back inside and getting it all off and everything. You know, it takes a great deal of time. So, you know, we want it to be a beautiful facility that's warm, inviting, and is a place that people want to come and see how they want to build their facilities.
Anything else you'd like to add?
It's covered for the most part.
We just received a coupon for this amount.
Anxiety in the hand.
I have been waiting for this.
Wow. You may proceed.
Ruffner,
Yes.
Servants,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Emphatic yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
Cole Jordan,
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Leoniger.
Yes.
Yes and yay.
So,
This is an agenda item that is going to keep coming back for a
oh,
while.
it's just
Reports along the way, so.
The lowercase y then, right?
Have you ever bought plans more expensive than yours?
I'd like them to continue to come up with numbers as challenging as possible.
Two of us couldn't manage to get it out.
It doesn't seem like unusual. All right, moving on to our bus purchase action item. The next item is the approval to purchase 5 new 2024 ICCE 72 passenger buses from Midwest Transit for a cost of $624,790. May I have a motion?
I call for a motion to approve the purchase of 5 new 2024 ICCE 72 passenger buses from Midwest Transit for a cost of $624,790.
Second.
Mr. Garber?
So this is a fairly large change. The past 10 or 12 years or so, we've been leasing buses. However, the purchase cost of a bus hasn't changed, you know, exponentially over the past few years. However, the lease price has. And when you look at a lease price of about $10,000 less than the purchase price of a cost over the extended time, it's kind of makes sense just to buy them. We do have a larger fund balance in the transportation fund so it's not a problem of funding the entire purchase. It will lower the lease cost prices in the future. These 5 buses coming off lease are just kind of that reciprocal timeline that we would replace them with. However, the last time we purchased a bus, kept it for 6 years, and then sold it back, we sold it back at a cost of around $36,000 in revenue. So financially, it just didn't make sense. We've had a good experience with this kind of bus the past few years, and I don't see why we would just lease it at that cost. Any questions? We did look into electric buses again. They are still over a year out from actually when we purchased them, and they are still
3 times
more expensive.
3 times the cost.
We do need the buses.
One day, we'll have electric buses.
I don't think it'll be very far off, but we just need to produce them.
I propose a monorail.
Survey?
Yes.
Sullivan?
Yes.
Workshop?
Yes.
Jordan? Yes. Joseph?
Yes.
Longo?
Yes.
Brooklyn?
Yes. All right, moving on to communication and information. There was one request and a response for information under the Freedom of Information Act during the period September 8th through October 12th. Junior, would you like to tell us who that was? You're welcome to read it if you'd like.
Sure. October 2nd, 2023, the district received a commercial request from Sherry Reed from Data Acquisition Specialist requesting purchase order and vendor information. Response is pending.
You know, I tried to look her up. I believe you would. And all I could find is other requests for information from other school districts. So, if there's no further business to come before the board, I call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Servants?
Yes.
Sullivan?
Yes.
Workshop?
Yes.
Jordan? Yes. Joseph?
Yes.
Longo?
Yes.
Bruckner?
Yes. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.